Okay, let's have a go with Illustrator and make something like this. Joshua Davis style random scatterbrush business. So let's just look at the setup in Illustrator first. We could make a print document here, so we can choose a 4-page here. Over on this side, we'll just give it a name, Josh D style. We can see the measurement of the page in centimeters. We can see the orientation. It's going to be portrait. We only want to have one artboard for now. Artboards are like pieces of paper on a table. We're only going to work on one piece of paper. We don't need to worry about any bleed area around the sides of the page. We might as well swap this over into RGB color, because this is really only going to be on the screen, the stuff that we're doing. And you can see here, if we do any effects, there'll be like Photoshop effects, and they'll be rendered quite high, but we're not going to do any of that. We don't need to worry about that little warning thing. All right, so let's just press create. Okay, so here is Illustrator, same kind of workspace thing as in Photoshop and InDesign. We can reset our Essentials layout here. If you do set it to Essentials Classic, and then it will look like this. So Workspace, Reset Essentials Classic. Over on the toolbar side on the left here, there's a bunch of tools that we're only going to use a couple of them. The main selection tool for clicking and dragging and moving things around, and the direct selection tool for manipulating shapes a little bit. We're going to use the rectangle tool here. We'll have a go with a couple of others as well, so we'll make a couple of different shapes. And we've got the properties up here for whatever it is that we're doing. So let's just make a couple of squares and change their colors a little bit. So there's 3 squares. If I use my selection tool, I can resize this. If I hold down shift, then it's going to keep it square. You can see I can round off the corners if I just click and drag these little mini inner corner things. Up here I've got the color of the fill here, so we can give it some kind of grayscale thing. Let's do a bit of that. Here's the stroke color, or we can have no stroke with the little red line through it. Here we can thicken it up, and then here we can play about with different sorts of stroke types. There's also brushes and things in here, which we'll have a look at over here in a minute. So we'll just change these so that they've got a little bit of color, and we'll give them a bit of a funny outline like that. That one. Oh yeah, and then let's just curve them in like this also. You could make some circles or whatever you want, stars, etc. Have a play with those. So if we use the direct selection tool, what we can do with the shapes now, you can see how these shapes are made of lines colored in, and the shape itself is colored in. When I use the direct selection tool, I can manipulate these points on the line. So these are the handles for the actual shape to help us manipulate it and move it around. I can click and drag over a couple of these anchor points, and I can move them around like that. So I can change how big it is. And then also, if you click on the actual anchor point, the little dot there, you can see that you get these little handles, additional handles that will appear, and these allow you to move things around even more. So we've got quite a lot of control over the elements of these shapes here. Yeah. So we can do that sort of thing. So we can make some weird blobs. I'm going to put this back to how it was, undo. There we go. Just going to change my layer order. So over here I've got my layers and I want the white box to be on top of these two. So that's indicated here. This is selected because I clicked it with my selection tool, and you can see that it's underneath the big one. So if I just drag that up, now it's on top of it like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these and I'm going to convert them into a scatter brush now. So if I just resize this a little bit, I'm holding down Shift to make it stay in proportion, and unselect it. Right, so now if I go to my little pot of brushes over here, click on that. There's different brush styles that I can use to change how the outline of these shapes are looking, and I don't really want to go into that. What I want to do is make my own brush out of these three shapes. So if I go and click on this little new brush box here and then select scatter brush, press OK, and now I can turn this into a brush. So you can see what I've got selected, and you can see that I've got a bunch of different options here. These can be controlled by a Wacom pen or something like that, depending on where it is and whatnot, or they can all be random. So I'm just going to set them all to random. And then I'm going to move these around, so I would be okay if my scatterbrush shape gets smaller than it is here by 50%, but I don't want it to get any bigger. Moving, spacing things around, so we could have things maybe 70% that way, bigger, smaller rather, and perhaps 130% bigger. Scatter, so how much it's throwing it around the page, let's just put that to about 70 something, and let's try -70 and then plus 70 something, and then rotation, we want it to spin around by maybe 90 degrees in either direction, and then this rotation is going to be relative to the brush that we're going to use, so how I move the brush around the page. So not the page, but the path, and the path is what I'll create with a brush. So we'll press OK, and we'll move this off our page here. We'll go and make, we'll just close that, we'll go and make a new layer. Yeah, so that's the layer that's got that shape on. If we just click here, we can make a new layer, we can hide that one, so go back here. This is our active layer here. And now if we get our brush and we scribble with it to make a path, it will scribble with the selected brush that we have here. Okay, so just do a scribble, and there we go. It starts to throw these around onto the page for us like this. So you can see some of them are bigger and some of them are smaller, and they're scattered around, so they're a bit random. And there's a few different ones because I did it a number of times. So these are on new layers inside this scatter brush layer. Scattered brush. Yeah, and I can turn them off, whatever. And then also you can see the actual path that I drew with the brush, and we can change that if we want to. So let's move some of these out of the way. Okay, so, oops. So this one here, if I use my direct selection tool, when that's selected, you can see the path that I scribbled, and we can change things about it if it'll let me. Let's try clicking and dragging over that point. There we go. So you can move this around and you can see how it will change how that looks. Yeah. so we can change the path after the fact. What you can also do to change things, if you're not happy with how the brush itself has worked, we can go back onto the brushes over here and then double click on the brush that we made, and then we can edit it. So we can change the size, make things smaller, so you can see as you do this it will shrink things a bit, and we can make some of them bigger like that. Maybe that's a bit much. We can change the spacing, so you go too far you don't see much of it. Bring it down a bit, and the rotation we can turn that up and down even more and change the amount of scatter one way or the other. And you can see how it does quite a bit of stuff in real time to whatever it is that you're doing. And if you press OK, it will ask you if you want to apply all of this to the strokes that you'd already made, or to leave it with your first version of things, but any subsequent scribbles that you'll do, it will apply it to them. So let's just apply, and it'll leave it like that. So this has made us some messy stuff, which is fun. And oops, yeah, we've got a bunch of shapes all over the place. What we can't do though now is change anything more than just move these things around. If we wanted to go in and edit it, remove some, change colors and stuff like that, we would have to do something else. So if we select everything, press Command and A, and then go to Object and Expand Appearance, what this will do is it will break apart all of the original, the line brushed shapes, and turn them all into the new, it'll sort of revert everything back to all of the shapes themselves. But look, so we had outlines and fills, and so we can really go in and mess things up here so they're not attached to each other, so we can maybe make something that is, I don't know, a bit more experimental, arty, something. So we've got quite a bit of control over things. So you can see I'm accidentally clicking on some of these points here and changing the lines that I perhaps don't want to change. But not that big a problem because we're just experimenting. There you go. Doesn't look too bad. Thank you very much.